In today's video, I'd really like to answer the question of why are pentatonic scales important? Let's start that by really kind of discussing the major scales. And so we're going to here look at a few different major scales. We're going to start with C major. And we really just want to make some observations here. Let's take a look at G major, and we're going to look at F major. And I'll answer the question of why we're sort of singling out those scales in just a little bit. All right, so what I'm going to do is just simply build these scales. All right, so F, G, A, B flat, C, D, E, F. Now, the next thing I really want to consider is, well, what does the C major pentatonic look like? And the C major pentatonic would be, well, it's be a C major scale, right? But we're going to be eliminating degrees 4 and 7. All right, so degrees 4 and 7. So the C major pentatonic is going to look like C, D, E, G, A, and back to C. Okay. Now let's think about degrees 4 and 7, and let's really make these kind of overly obvious. If I eliminated F and I eliminated B, now let's take a look at G major. If I eliminated my type of F here, and if I eliminated a kind of B. Now what you might notice, well, let's see, if I got rid of the F from the C major scale, notice that I'm no longer able to tell. The F is sort of the determining factor of whether something is from C major or whether something is from G major. In other words, what's the only difference between C major and G major? Well, that would be the F or the F sharp. So F or F sharp. If I don't have an F or an F sharp, I have no way of determining whether it's really from C major or whether it's from G major. Now let's go on a little bit further and let's think about why is the B note the one that gets eliminated? And again, we want to consider, well, what's the difference between C major and F major? And the only difference here is the B versus the B flat. So we can sort of maybe think of it like this. Like this is the idea here, and this B flat sort of gets pulled around. Like those are the ones that we're sort of comparing at the moment. If I don't have any sort of a B, I can't tell whether or not the key is from C major or whether it's from F major. There's no possible way for me to tell. So here's the deal. If I don't have F or B, I can't tell if this scale comes from G or F or C. I just simply cannot tell. So let's go a little bit further and imagine for a second that I eliminated the B note here and I eliminated the F notes here. Okay. And if I do that, you'll notice, well, wait a minute, aren't these all the same? I've got C, D, E, C, D, E, C, D, E, and here I've got G, A, G, A, G, A, and then of course I've got, C and G, some leftovers, but those are just repeated notes. And so what ends up happening is that all three of these scales end up looking identical. Now, there's two things to really consider. One is, why is that important? And two is, how did I choose these scales? Are these just sort of random scales that I chose, or is there some relationship here? Okay, let's answer the first question. And the first question is, why does that matter? Well, if you're a soloist, right, if you do improvisation, what this really allows for you is, as a beginner, you have so much freedom. These notes would typically be considered conflict notes. For example, this note of F and this note of B, these are some of the most conflicting notes with the C note. Okay, B and C are highly dissonant. C and F aren't necessarily highly dissonant, but if you learn something about chords, you'll know that, which we're going to explore later on, that C major has also in the chord, it has the notes E and G, and F doesn't really play nicely with those notes. It's also a little bit dissonant, and dissonant, maybe that's a new word that we should define. Some of those notes would be dissonant. Dissonant. And that just simply means, for lack of a really good in-depth explanation, it's just notes that sound bad together. So let's just write that. Notes that sound bad together. So they don't sound good. So the idea is we're sort of eliminating conflict notes. So if we eliminate B and F, we're eliminating notes that we are for sure going to go, well, there's definitely dissonance there, and there's not a lot of resolution that occurs in those tones at all. So that's sort of the reason why we choose to eliminate F and B, or from the C major scale. Otherwise, being the fourth and the 7th degree. That's the reason why. Now, how did I come up with this idea of, the C major scale, the G major scale, and the F major scale? How did I come up with those ones? Well, let's think about that and how it relates to the circle of fifths. Let's look at C major, and if I had a C major here, and if I had, I'm just going to do a really quick circle, okay, and if I go 1 unit to the right, this direction, and I'm going to go 1 unit to the left, and this direction. 1 unit to the right would give me, in the dominant keys, a G major. 1 unit to the left would give me F major. And so this is, once again, the right side being my dominant keys, and the left side being sort of my subdominant keys. So what F and C represent are the two most closely related keys. So they are the two most closely related keys. Okay, the two most closely related key signatures. And what that means for you is that there's a lot of freedom. And we can, for example, take a look at C major and G major. Well, I noticed that the only difference is the F, right? That's the only difference. And so if I think about the notes, there are 7 notes in C major, and there are 7 notes in G major. They only differ by 1 note, though, right? So they're, essentially they're 6/7 the same. They are 6/7 the same. Okay, they're almost exactly the same. They're very, very closely related. And if I think about, so C major to G major, if I think about C major and F major, those two particular scales would also be 6/7 the same. They're almost exactly the same scale there. Now, if I think about maybe G major and F major, are they 6/7 the same? Well, let's see, they both have a G. Okay, so they both have a G. They both have an A. They differ on the B's. They both have a C. They both have a D. They both have an E. They differ on the F's. So realistically, those are only 5/7 the same. And you can see that that's not the same amount of relationship. They're not as closely related. And so that's how we get our close relationships and our key signatures, is from the circle of fifths. In future videos, we are going to take a look at trying to understand how do we determine what are the two closely related key signatures.